Right, so I want to talk a little bit about the SSP Cast Burrs, the Sweet Lab style burrs, which I haven't tried the original Sweet Labs, but I don't know if they're exactly like the same. They're supposed to be kind of knockoff of the design, but from what I've heard from Brian Kwan's video, um, it sounded. Wait, was that him or was that? Oh, I'm thinking of Lance. Um, his video. So he was saying the original Sweet Labs were higher body and less clarity, and he preferred the 64 millimeter cast SSP ones because he likes clarity. But I really didn't find these to be so clear unless it changes with more seasoning. Um, I also have a set of these burrs in the DF64 at the moment. This P64 came with these. So I got two sets, and I was comparing a little bit the DF64 versus P64, which should be pretty much the same, and it kind of is. I was actually getting, maybe it's just luck, because I was dialing in coffees on different grinders and different coffees. I used a few to test. So yeah, a lot of the times the DF64 was better. But it was very slight. It was a little different. And what I found, I believe it's because the burrs were a little more seasoned in the DF64. I've used it for longer. This I bought used, but it was barely used. So that's a factor. But I also want to talk about the RPM. So the benefit of having it in a P64 is that you can have variable RPM. So I've been doing a little experiments, not too much, but I mostly do espresso today. I did some AeroPress as well. So I want to know, is there a difference? Is there a benefit with these burrs, high RPM and low RPM? So I did notice a very subtle difference. Today I did AeroPress, and I think I noticed the same thing for Espresso as well, although I didn't go quite as extreme on the range, because it goes from 1 to 9, which is like 200 to 1400 RPM. Today for AeroPress, I did the lowest, 200, another one, identical AeroPress at 1400, and there's a slight subtle difference. I found similar results for Espresso. Very subtle difference, so I do notice a little more flavor clarity, a little smoother shots with the lower RPM. I wouldn't say it's a high clarity grinder or burr. The P64 can be a really high clarity grinder, but it's like, yeah, it's a totally different beast with going from the SSP unimodal multi-purpose burrs to the SSP cast burrs. I find it's like totally different. I'd say it's more conical. This is a conical grinder, and this is less conical than the SSP cast burrs, I'd say. I know it doesn't really make sense, but I think some flat burrs are more conical-like than others, and some conical burrs are more flat-like than others. So the Weber key here on the right, that is very flat burr-like. Just has more clarity, less body, where the cast burrs in this, a little more body, and not so much clarity. You get a little bit clarity, but I'd say it's more similar to like a good conical burr. But then it's like, what is the point? Why do I have it in either a P64, which is pretty expensive, or even a DF64? You're spending money on the grinder and the burrs. Why not just get a cheaper conical burr grinder that has a similar profile for a lot less money? Maybe it's not as nice to use. This is a beautiful grinder. It's very nice to use, so that's a benefit. But I'd say this is better suited to like a high clarity burr set for like light roasts. And if you want something for like chocolatey, high body, like just get a niche zero or even like a Lagom a Lagom Mini, which is a smaller conical burr, which people say is quite good. It just takes longer to grind for espresso. It's the only downside, and it might not be as powerful. So Some people are worried about the longevity if you're using it for like lots of espresso, but I think Option O makes good products and they're probably going to be okay. But yeah, might not last quite as long as a P64. I don't know. So, back to what I was saying about RPM. So I noticed with the AeroPress today, and I think with Espresso as well, in the past from the testing I've been doing, you get a little more body or a little more bitterness, like a little more strength to the coffee at higher RPM, and I noticed a more lingering aftertaste. I used a coffee that I didn't really like for the AeroPress test today, so the lingering aftertaste was a little weird, but that was because it's a weird coffee. It was, it was a weird one. I had two coffees that had a similar taste. It's one of them was a geisha. Both of them are expensive coffees, and it didn't taste good. It's just a weird flavor. It's like undescribable. It didn't taste like fruit. It didn't taste like anything I've ever tasted. It's just a weird flavor. So yeah, I made that in the AeroPress today. I think I preferred. I mean, yeah, it wasn't that big of a difference. So I'm surprised. Going from the lowest RPM to highest RPM, very subtle difference. A little more lingering aftertaste in the high RPM. Maybe a little more flavor clarity. A little smoother in the low RPM, but really. These burrs in the DF64 at full, it's basically the same as full RPM on this, 1400. They perform fine, so I don't think you're really missing too much on the DF64 at full RPM with those burrs at least. Similarly, I believe I've been pulling better shots, like less channeling, at higher RPMs. I thought that was true of the unimodal multi-purpose burrs, like there were two unimodal, and that's why it was harder to pull shots at lower RPM. But I think today I noticed, it's not conclusive or anything, but I noticed some channeling today on a low RPM espresso shot. So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe it's like you need the extra fines, or you just need really careful puck prep, and maybe I didn't do things perfectly. I do get channeling sometimes. I believe I'm getting more consistently, better pulling shots at higher RPMs. So super low RPM might not be so useful. I mean, it's nice to have the feature and experiment, but I wouldn't say it's 100% necessary. So don't worry if you have a grinder that doesn't have variable RPM, you're still good. As long as it's not like ridiculously high RPM, like 2000. Most like the DF64 and most Eureka grinders are like 1400, maybe 1600, which should be okay. The other thing about low RPM is you do get more retention. It doesn't shoot out with such force when, I think more coffee will stick to the burrs. It probably sticks more in the declumper area with any grinder, just because it doesn't have the force to shoot out the coffee as much as at higher RPM. So like the Lagom P100, the bigger brother of this guy, it has like an auto ramping feature, which it goes from like whatever your RPM is. When it's done grinding, it will ramp up to the maximum RPM and shoot out the extra retention. So you can do the same thing on this, to just do it manually by ramping up the RPM at the ending of the end of your grind. And that's what I do. Sometimes you notice a little bit extra comes out. Same thing with this guy. It actually has a turbo button, which is handy because then you just press this extra button. This is the monolith flat. So that's my findings. I find this guy, the monolith flat with variable RPM, I do notice, I think, more of a difference. With lower RPM, you get more clarity, less bitterness, but also less body. This one I find I prefer it at low RPM. I think it makes more of a difference. These are with the the monolith flat is with the Shuriken LM burrs. I think it makes more of a difference going from low to high RPM. Unfortunately, this grinder is ridiculously slow at lower RPM, but that's how I use it. That's a downside. The P64, not too bad at low RPM, or it doesn't seem like it anyway, at least with these burrs. The key, I haven't experimented enough to say how much I did notice similarly, even though it's a conical burr, I think it acts similarly. Although some people do say that there is a difference on the Weber key. On high RPM, usually you get slower flowing shots, like the fines you'll get more fines at higher RPM. So your shot timing should go longer and you should be having to adjust your grind size coarser as a result. But I think they found the opposite. I don't know if I've noticed this personally, but I've seen other people say this. So lower RPM actually gives you a longer shot time for some reason, and higher RPM gives you a faster shot time. I don't know if I confirmed it. I think that's happened to me once or twice, but I haven't really been paying enough attention. Actually, I should probably review my notes because I do make notes with shot times and everything to keep track of which grind size works for what coffee. When you have so many grinders and so many coffees, you gotta have a notepad to keep track of things. I'm still not that organized. So yeah, I did notice with the key, similarly low RPM is it does seem like it gives you less fines, or like flavor wise at least. It seems smoother at lower RPM. A little less clarity, maybe more harshness at higher RPM, which I assume is from more fines, but I'm not sure if I'm getting more body or not at higher RPM. This grinder seems like it's pretty low body, even at higher RPM. You might get a little more, but I don't think it makes that much of a difference. So yeah, I'd say lower RPM is better on the Weber key, and yeah, so you're not missing out too much if you go to the Weber HG2 or HG1 Prime. Those are going to be lower RPM because you're doing it by hand. So yeah, I don't think there's a benefit to higher RPM besides faster grind, but it's relatively quick even at medium or lower RPM. It's not that slow. It's their big burrs in the Weber key. So yeah, for conical you want lower RPM. Flat burr, I guess you want lower RPM to an extent, but there's more of a trade-off. I don't know, actually. So with the key, I generally use it at maybe medium RPM to lower RPM if I want more flavor clarity. And this guy, I'm keeping it around 7, which I believe is like 1250 RPM usually, and I found that worked best with the other burrs as well. It's relatively fast and flavor is good. The monolith I find benefits more. The maximum RPM on that is only 800, and I have it on like 365 just because I like that number. And it's yeah, that's what I'd say is on the lower end for the monolith. But yeah, it doesn't really go that high, but I do notice a difference from like the highest or even close to the highest RPM versus like 200, 400 RPM.